Hello everyone and welcome to this recorded session for guidance on literature reviews. A literature review is something that will appear in your research project proposal and in your final research project report, and it's some people find it quite difficult, so the point of this recording is to give you some advice on what a literature review is, how to structure and go about a literature review, and to give you some advice on writing up a literature review and how it fits into the whole research project process. We'll also be looking at just the basics and give you some reminders of Harvard referencing. This is important because obviously in the literature review you are looking a lot of other authors, their research, their theories, their discussions and ideas, and of course you need to reference that. So, and if you don't, obviously this could be picked up on for plagiarism and things like that. So we just need to be careful on this. Remember that you've got, in any research project unit that you may be working on at Pearson, the literature review occurs in both the research proposal and in the major project that you're going to be submitting. Okay, it occurs in both. Now, in the research project proposal, we have a kind of a small literature review. It's like a mini literature review. However, it's really important that you show the examiner that you have some insight and understanding of your topic area and the theories, the core theories, and the discussion that is there. Admittedly, one of the problems with the literature review within the research project proposal is that you haven't got much space. You are limited. It's a very concise, very brief piece of work, the research project proposal, and therefore you have to try and get as much detail in as possible without using too many words. And that's what they're testing there, is you being able to be concise, being able to actually convey complex information, detailed information, but doing it in few words without losing meaning. So that is the test there. When you come to the major research report, when you submit that, the literature review is actually a whole chapter, a whole big section in that research report. So you've got far more space. But that doesn't mean you just kind of spread it out with waffle. You need to show much more depth. You need to show much more understanding. There's much more detail that you can go into, and a lot more literature you need to go into. One of the big things, one of the big tick boxes for a literature review is that you are looking at or surveying a lot of literature in your area, and it's rich in the number of referencing and the number of authors and the number of theories that you're looking at that are important to your topic. So, you know, literature reviews that have, I've got based on 2 or 3, 4 theories is limited. It suggests that you haven't spent the time studying and understanding the topic and the research topic that you're in, and that shows limited level of studying and limited level of engagement to the module, and that's where the marks fall off. So you need to be able to show that you need to almost show that you're an expert in your topic and you know all the background to this topic, and therefore you can go on to research it, because you'll notice that the next chapter or the next section in your research report is the methodology, that you're going to put together some research methods to go and research this problem, opportunity, or issue that you've got. You know the background to it. Now, if you're trying to be an expert in this topic and you're researching and you're going to make recommendations on the topic, you need to know the background. And the literature review is all about understanding the background to the topic. I mean, a basic definition of a literature review is an explanation of knowledge, past, current and past, on a topic or related to a topic found within academic books or journals. I mean, when you talk about knowledge, we're talking about literature reviews are usually about research findings, people that have done research in the past, theories that people have put together on your topic, or frameworks, framework or models that people have put together. So what we're trying to look at is the discussion on your topic, in the textbooks and the journals. Now, you probably remember me saying in the past that the textbooks are great, don't get me wrong, they're a great place to start to give you a good background. However, textbook information is quite dated. It takes about 10 years to get research into a textbook. Those theories that come out from research, it takes about 10 years to get into a textbook. So it's quite aged. To get the fresher, the newer stuff, you need to go into the academic journals and need to look at what's happening there. And to get better marks, I would advise you to start reading the journals. At level 6, your final year, definitely read the journals, get into them immensely. You've got to spend time reading those and searching for them. At level 5, your second year, journals, okay, not so serious, but you still need to get into them. Okay, not as much as level 6, not as much as the final year, but you still need to get into them. And of course, level 4, you're just starting out. Your first years, you need to get into the routine of this process. You need to be looking at the textbooks, but also you can get a few journal papers in there. Get used to searching around the journal databases. Pick up some journals and put there in. That's going to be fantastic for you because you're just progressing and getting used to the process. So what's the purpose of a literature review? Well, as I said, it's about understanding the background to your topic. Eventually, in your research topic, you're going to be providing some advice and recommendations at the end of your research topic. That's the whole point of this. It's not just for fun. You're actually tackling issues, a problem, an opportunity that is actually important to someone. And remember that in that background section, you're going to have to be justifying why and who this research topic is important to, who's it going to have an effect on, and why it's going to have an effect on them, and why it's so important to look at it. Eventually, at the end of this topic, at the end of this whole research process, you're going to have to be making recommendations. Now, you can't make recommendations if you don't know the ins and outs of the topic. So the literature review is a process of self-study. It's a process of making sure that you as an individual understand your topic, and that's why we say that you need to choose a topic that you have to be interested in, because if you're going to try and get into under the skin of this topic and you're going to be looking at it in depth, and you need to understand it in depth, you must be able to be interested in it, and that's really important. So we need to understand the background, need to understand what's going on. We also do a literature review to make sure that we don't duplicate research and waste our time. Now, some problems, some issues, some opportunities might be answered by looking at current research. It might not need to be a new research topic. Someone else has done the research out there. Now, if that's the case, there's no point reinventing the wheel. So it's to make sure that the topic that we're looking at hasn't been done before, and that we're not going to waste our time. When we're looking at the literature and we're looking at other people's work and other people's research, especially in the journal papers, authors will give details of how they've researched the topics. That gives you clues and an indication of how to put together your methodology. Okay, so they have put some thoughts together about the best ways to research this. So that's a great way of looking at how to understand how to research these topics. So when you're looking at these journal papers, when you're looking at other people's research in your area, look at how they researched it, look at the methodologies that they used, and look at maybe if they've put up any weaknesses or problems with their methodology, because then you can avoid them. So it helps us give clues of how we can put together our methodologies for our research projects. A literature review can highlight key findings and key theories that are linked to our project, which could help us, and that's very important. These theories could be there. We can always go back to them in the last part of our research topic, in the research process, in the concluding and the discussion part, the very last chapter, because we want to see if our findings differ to the existing theories. So it's important to look at what's available now, because our findings might say something different. Now, in research, there's a term called contribution, a contribution to knowledge. And at the end of your research project report, you've got to try and say is that this is what I set out doing, these were my objectives, and this is what I found out. And this is different or extra to what other theories or other research has been done in this area. And that's your contribution. You found something different. You found something new. So the whole aim of this is to make a contribution to knowledge, that you've done some research, you spent a lot of time understanding what's going on. You've done some research, you've worked something out that seems to be new or different to what other people are saying. And that's your contribution to knowledge. So that's the thing we're trying to aim for. And to do that, we need to understand what the current state of play is. I mean, you wouldn't enter into a discussion if you didn't know what you were talking about. And the point of a literature review is to make sure you know what you're talking about in your topic. An examiner wants to know and wants to feel that you know what you're talking about. If you don't do a good literature review, that whole process falls apart. One of the big things with a literature is you've got to avoid being too descriptive. Okay, one of the first tick boxes, as I said, for a literature review for an examiner is that you are surveying a lot of literature. You're getting under the skin of a lot of authors, a lot of theories that link to your topic. Now, I've said in the past in these recordings that for some students they may be choosing a very innovative topic or a topic that's brand new. Some of digital marketing stuff, some of the anything digital business stuff is really new stuff, and there may not be research out there that exactly fits your research topic. In that case, you've got to think about the related topics out there that are related or associated in some way. And in your literature review, you've got to say, well, why is this topic related? Why is these theories related to your topic? How could they help us understand what's going on for our problem, our opportunity, and our issue? Once you've kind of got a lot of literature, a lot of authors, a lot of theories, and you're understanding quite a lot under the skin, and you're developing a really rich and deep knowledge of the actual background to your topic, you can then think about being critical of the existing research and existing theories. Now, what this means is you've got to try and understand or think about what are the disadvantages with the current theories or research that you've been reading. In other words, are there any consistencies between any theories? Are people being contradictory? Different authors, different theories in your topic. Is there contradictions? Okay, which doesn't seem to fit right. Do people say different things, or what's happening here? But also, think about, does the theories or the research that you're actually reading about and understanding, does it help you with your problem, your opportunity, or your issue? Because if it doesn't help, and you can say why it doesn't help, then that is what we mean by being critical. Because we've got to demonstrate in our literature review that all the knowledge and all the literature and all the theories that are already out there on our topic don't help us. Because if they do help us, there's no point doing the research. Okay, so we've got to develop arguments that say this theory here by this author is about this, and you describe it into some depth and clearly show that you understand it. Don't be afraid to draw diagrams or put the models in or the frameworks into your literature review. Okay, talk them through, say what they're about, and then of course you need to then say, well, what's the problems with it? Why doesn't this help us with my opportunity or my issue or my problem that I'm trying to research? What are the weaknesses with this topic? And of course, if you can back up your argument with references to figures or facts or other theories or other literature to help show that this theory or this research isn't appropriate and doesn't help us with our problem, opportunity, or issue, fantastic. That's the ultimate goal. That is difficult, and that would be the ultimate goal for a level 6 student, a final year undergraduate student. You definitely want to be trying to get into that routine for a level 5, a second year student. And for level 4, you want to make sure you can get into the routine of researching, getting a lot of literature down, getting an understanding under the skin of a topic, and then trying to start to think about problems with the topic. So you can see that there's a process, an escalating process throughout this to your ultimate level 6, your final year, which is the most important year, which has a huge bearing on your degree. And when the thing with being critical, again, we've got to argue that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not actually doing research that someone else has done. So we've got to say that no one else's research fits what we're trying to do, and that's the key here. And again, the other key is always support your critical points. Try to say, well, why is this not appropriate? And give references to Mintel, The Economist, or wherever, government agency, government reports. Try to back up your reasons for why the current theory, the current literature that you're reading and understanding is not appropriate, or there's problems with it. Again, there's no right and wrong with a problem or an issue that you have with a theory. The only right or wrong is if you haven't backed it up, then the argument is weak. And of course, remember that this whole process, this research process, is about developing your own arguments and thinking independently and acting independently and managing this whole process independently. And of course, one of the biggest things is thinking about your arguments. Why do you think this theory is inappropriate, and what evidence can you also reference to help you say that theory is inappropriate and therefore your research is still needed? Here's an example of being critical, okay? And if you can get to something close to this, you're doing really well. So what we've got here is a paragraph from a literature review, and it's about a theory that they've been talking about, and some authors that have been talking about. So we've got here strategists such as T. Settle, 1997, Eisenhart and Martin, 2000, and Winter, 2003, draw on research generated from gigantic multinational corporations such as Toyota, IBM, Texas Instruments, McDonald's, and Starbucks. However, SMEs, also known as small and medium sized enterprises, account for 99% of firms in Britain. And of course, if you see there in that paragraph, that's been referenced from the Small Business Service, so a government agency. So that's credible. It's not the Sun, it's credible. And it continues. However, SMEs account for 99% of all firms in Britain, reference the Small Business Service 2001, making them more important than large organisations in their overall contribution to jobs and the health of the UK's economy. And again, there's two references there. So you can see that in this paragraph, we've been looking at the theories posed by these authors: T. Settle, Eisenhart, Martin, Winter. All their research appears to be in, as it's listed there, these multinational corporations: Toyota, IBM, Texas Instruments, McDonald's, Starbucks. They're huge organisations, global organisations. Fine, that's where they've done their research. Great. However, the criticism of that in the latter part of the paragraph is that actually small firms have been neglected here. And the reason small firms are important is because, according to the Small Business Service, a reference to back up the argument, 99% of all small firms, all firms in Britain are small firms. That's a huge figure, 99%. That's an excellent reference to support my claim, or the claim, that we should be researching into small businesses. And then, of course, it backs that up even further by saying actually the contribution of these these small organisations and the health of the economy is massive. And of course, that's been referenced to some authors that have been talking about that. So you can clearly see now that's the aim. I mean, that's the real aim, is to say these are some theories, this is what they've been researching about, but this is the problem. Okay, and whatever the problem is completely up to you. You've got to think about what the problem is. The highest marks for this will come to those students who can think critically. They're not just kind of spoon-fed. They just don't believe everything everything they're reading or everything they've been taught. They must think critically. They look at them, read all this material, they get a good insight into the literature, and then they think, actually, I think there's a problem here, and the problem is this. And the way I can actually say this is a problem is by referencing a government agency, or referencing something in The Economist, or referencing some other theory or author that shows there is a problem, and actually, therefore, the research needs to be taking a different direction. So that's the aim to go for that. I mean, that's a really good example. That's, they were talking 90% kind of marking for that kind of piece, but that's the aim anyway. So long as you understand the aim, then you can try and aim for it. Okay, so how do I find all this material, all these theories, all this literature that I need to read? Okay, well, this is where you need to think a little bit more and brainstorm before you go and start your literature review. The first stage in the literature review is actually just getting all those textbooks or getting those journal papers in a pile ready to read. And that's the big thing, because remember, one of the first things to get good marks here is that you need to show that you understand this topic in good depth, and that means looking at a lot of authors, a lot of research, and a lot of theories that are linked to your topic. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have a clear definition of the issue, the problem, or the opportunity, the practical issue, problem, opportunity that we're trying to research. We've clearly defined that, we've justified it, saying that it's really important to this business or really important to this industry. We've done that in previous sessions. Once we've got that done, we then need to think about what are the key terms. What terms could academics or other people researching this topic be using to write about it? Okay. Now, some topics are easier than others. Okay, so email marketing, for example, straightforward. Click-through rates, and they're really straightforward terms. But you must think about and brainstorm all the key terms that people could be using to describe your problem, your opportunity, your issue. And then once you've got those key terms down, you can hit the databases. You can hit things like EBSCO, the Business Source complete database, Emerald, Wiley Online, all those databases that you have access through Pearson College. Put those key terms in and see what comes up, and read the abstracts. Read the abstracts and go and print them off and read them. Now, the literature review is time consuming. I won't, it's hugely time consuming. You can't do this a week or two or even a month before you submit your research project. It is hugely time consuming, and it can be overwhelming for some people. So my advice is to do your searching, get your key terms down, get those articles, get those textbooks, get those chapters all ready to read, and read a couple a day, or one a day, on the tube, on the bus, in a coffee shop. Just try and do one or two a day. That's all I would advise you to do. You can't just sit there reading for 8 hours a day. It's just not achievable. It's just not realistic. So, but what you can do is do a couple a day, or maybe just one a day. You do that once a day, you've got 5 articles in a week. So it adds up. But you must start early, and that's the key. What I want you to do now, and if you don't want to, you can just keep listening, but if you want to, pause the recording now, and I want you to spend 5 or 10 minutes brainstorming keywords that are linked to your problem, your opportunity, or your issue that you're trying to research. List those keywords down, get them written down, and of course then you have a bank of keywords that you can go and search these journal databases for. Pause the recording now, spend 5-10 minutes, and when you're ready, then please continue to listen. Right, moving on. So let's imagine we've got our key terms, we've put them into the database, and we've found our articles. Great, we've got them printed off, or we saved them to our iPad. Fine, we've got them ready to read. What do I need to do when I'm reading them? Now, this is the next process. You don't just read them, you have to study them. And there's a difference between reading and studying, okay? When we're studying something, we're trying to engage with it. We're trying to understand it in depth. We're trying to make sure we actually can remember it. That's what studying's about. It's not just reading it and then going in one end and coming out the other. We've got to study articles. Now, however, these articles are quite lengthy, so we need to make some kind of notes or summary of what they're about. One of the big skills of a literature review is that you've got to try and get a lot of information together, and you've got to get it into a chapter or a section within your research project, and that's quite, you could have maybe 30-40 references to stuff, and that's quite a lot of stuff, so you've got to be able to structure it and keep everything together. And the best way to do this is through notes, making notes for each article or chapter of a book that you read. So simply have every article you read, do some summary notes, so you can easily refer to it. Last thing you want to do when you're writing your literature review is refer back to the whole article. You just want to refer back to some notes on the article, so it's easier to write around the article rather than keep going back to that article that you've read 4 weeks ago. So what I would do when you're making notes and you're reading these articles, the first thing to do is write down what their aims and objectives were. What were they trying to do here? What was the point of the article? And then go into, if they did do some primary research, in other words, they did some research methodology. How did they research? Was it questionnaires? How many people did they send it to? Who were they sending it to? Was it interviews? Who did they interview? What was the research methodology? Remember, that's really important, because that will give you clues on how you should research your own topic. Okay. And of course, once you've looked at research design, look at the findings. What's the concluding series? What's the result of the article and the result of the research? So you've got a good summary on an A4 piece of paper for one article about their aims and objectives, how they went about the research, what were their findings, key findings, and what were the concluding theories they came up with or posed. And then once you've read it and thought about it, you can think critically. And again, this is the high level skill. Okay, the high level skill is thinking critically about this research and this information. What's the problems? What do you think the disadvantages were? Did they do all their research in big businesses? Did they do their research only on teenagers from 18 to 20? What about older people? What about middle-aged people? What about unemployed people? What did they miss? What do you thought they missed? And those things that they missed, are you actually going to be doing? Are you looking at a different company? Are you looking at a different sector? Did they do all the research in the coffee shop sector? And actually, your research is in manufacturing. Has anyone done any research in manufacturing or whatever you're looking at? So those arguments that you're posing and the problems with people's existing research should also be trying to point the reader, okay, into the direction of your topic and help justify why your topic is really important. When you're writing the literature review, it can be difficult to get all these papers, all this information down in a coherent manner. And structure is also a big thing that an examiner looks for. So there's several suggestions here, and I would also recommend that you spend time planning out the structure of your literature review, because if it is unstructured, it suggests that you're unable to coherently manage the volume of data. And of course, we're marking on people's skills and ability here. So if we've got a chapter that is all over the place, it doesn't have much depth to individual articles, it doesn't go into much detail, in other words, and it jumps over the place, there's no real structure to it. Of course, that's going to get a lesser mark than someone that they go into a lot of depth onto individual articles, and all those articles are linked together in a nice story-like fashion that come to a nice conclusion. Now, you've got to plan it out. You've got to say, right, which article am I going to look at first? Which theory am I going to look at first? And then what's the next one? And what's the link between them, so I can see that I can make a flow between the articles. Now, that is a difficult challenge, and it's always a challenge. It's even a challenge for experienced academics to do, and it takes time to plan out. I mean, for stuff that I've done in the past, PhD, masters, research topics, I spent half a day planning out just the order in which I was going to write about the different articles and different research papers that I'd been reading. So, planning out to plan the story is really important. There is some basic recommendations, though, you can go for. Some people like to put the order of the theories or the articles that they're going to be looking at in the literature review in chronological order. In other words, in time order. So if you found one published in the 1950s, fine, that goes first. Something in the 1960s, another one in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. You do it in time order, so you can show how the topic has developed over time, all the way to the present day at the end. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Or you could categorize things into themes. So you've been reading lots of articles, and you could say, well, these articles here are all about research into big businesses. These articles here are all research about small businesses. These articles here about research into employees. These articles here research into customers related to the topic. So and that's the themes and the categories that are up to you. You can choose them, and as you're reading, you'll realise that actually, these three articles actually are all on the same theme. They're all doing research into online ordering systems, whereas these over here are all doing research onto kind of delivery systems. So you can cluster them how you want, and as you're reading, you'll probably get to realise that there's different categories which will start to emerge. Obviously, if you don't read many articles, those categories won't emerge, and that's why I say read, and start as early as possible on the topic that you're looking at. You could also look about the arguments you want to pose. So if you think there's some core arguments, some core criticisms of the work, then group them around those criticisms. So you can, these 5 articles here, they're all the big problem with these ones is that there's no research. There's actually no research. There's no actual primary research that they've done. It's all just thoughts and discussion. Whereas these articles here, the problem with this one, they all research managers. Actually, what I'm researching is the actual employees, the people on the shop floor, are at the coalface. So that's their problem. They've done the good research there, but actually I want to research a different way. They've missed out maybe some important people in the business. But one of the big key recommendations for a literature review is that it must be story-like. It must flow. You've got to think about the structure. You've got to think about how one article feeds into the next article and what's the link. It can't, it's very difficult to don't break it. It's got to be flowing and story-like, which is important. That's why I say you've got to spend time planning it out. You can have titles and subtitles in a literature review. You can have diagrams, models, fine, not a problem. The way to write these things, if you look at academic textbooks, if you look at academic journal papers, you'll notice they're not an essay and they're not a report. They're somewhere in between. So they do divide it into sections, and your literature review can be divided into sections, and you can have titles, and those titles are completely up to you. But don't be afraid to do that. So it is somewhere between an essay, okay, and a report. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not an essay which just a blanket of text for loads and loads of words. Actually, it's more of a kind of a cross between an essay and a report, where you have sections, but in those sections they might be like little essays. Some general advice on the total structure of a literature review. So the first major section would be an introduction, and in this introduction, the main thing that you're going to be doing is introducing the literature that you're going to be writing about for that section. And here you should also be making the link between your practical issue, opportunity or problem that you've described in the background, and saying which literature actually is it going to be linked to, or is it linked to, and say why it's linked to. Some people that would be obvious, okay, but others it's not. You've got to think about what literature would be really useful to and linked to your topic. So some people have to think about that more intently. But the introduction section is about introducing and linking the theories that you're going to be talking about in your literature review and the topics you're going to be talking about in your literature review to your practical problem, issue or opportunity that you've started out with. And then they've got this main body, and of course the main body is going to be addressing and looking at all those articles, all those theories that are linked to your topic. And again, as I say before, you've got to show the examiner that you're under the skin, you understand the background to your topic, you understand what's happening, and you're almost showing that you're an expert in this field, and that later on in your research project, you can advise the companies, the industries, the government on this area, and that's what you're trying to do, and that's where obviously you're going to pick up the marks. So the main body can be divided into sections, and I've talked about how those sections could be divided up by themes, by chronological order, by arguments, however you want to do it. That's totally up to you. Don't be afraid to use headings or subheadings. Remember, this is a cross between a report and an essay, so you're fine to divide it up, but don't be too brief. It's not report-like in terms of bullet points and small paragraphs. You've got to go into the depth. You've got to give some detail here. So it's very important. You must also think how each section you have, and you've put a title to it or a subtitle to it, how it flows into the next section. How does it all link together so you get this story-like feel to your work? So plan the structure. Spend time planning the structure, and provide depth and detail. Don't be too brief. Obviously within the word limits, but don't be too brief, and definitely don't put things like bullet points, because that is too report-like. In terms of the last section, the conclusions, this is where you're highlighting and really driving home that there's problems or inconsistencies with the current literature and theories. Here, what you're trying to do ultimately is justify your own work. What you're trying to say is that I've looked at the background here. There's these problems, and these problems I'm going to try and look at and help with my research. You're trying to basically justify your own research topic. Okay, no one else has looked at it. No one else has looked at management at Royal Mail. They've looked at management at DHL. They've looked at management in Amazon, but they've never looked at management in Royal Mail. Royal Mail's important because it's a huge employer. accounts for a huge part of the market, and that's the important thing here. So we're trying to justify and show that our topic still is important, even though no one else, even though we've looked at all the background research and theories here. When you're writing and reading, you're writing your literature review, okay, you've got to summarise the author's works, okay. You've got to summarise the theories that are linked to your topic, and you've got to go through in detail. You've got to show that you understand them. Some people pull out big paragraphs and quote huge paragraphs, and what I mean by that, they do direct quotes. Actually, don't do direct quotes. That only shows that you can basically copy and paste. Well, fine, anyone can copy and paste, but we're at a degree now. We are actually intelligent human beings. We can put things into our own words. If you can't put things into your own words, then it shows that you don't understand it, and of course that's where you're going to lose marks. So make sure you don't do too many direct quotes, and you don't make sure you put things into your own words.